At 28, I should have had my life together. I used to have everything, a high-paying job in tech, an apartment in Manhattan, that made people ask, how the hell did you manage that? I felt like I was on top of the world, like I had it all figured out. Then, just like that, it all fell apart. One round of layoffs, and my job was gone. I fought for a while, scrambled to find new work, but nothing came through. That sleek apartment, gone too. Now I was stuck in a tired old building in Queens, a third-floor walk-up with peeling paint, creaky floors, and the sort of charm you can only find in a place that hasn't seen a renovation in 20 years. But the price was right, and at this point, the city was all I had left, so I settled. But there was one thing that started to bother me more than the noise from the neighbors, more than the ancient plumbing that always seemed to be groaning at me. It was the sink. It started small, a tiny spot of what I thought was mold, right where the countertop met the sink. At first, I wasn't too worried. It was a grimy apartment, and mold is a part of the city living, right? I figured I'd scrub it down with some bleach and be done with it. But it didn't go away. The spot grew. Slowly at first, just a little darker, a little bigger. I'd clean it up, and the next day it was back, creeping its way up the faucet. I figured I was just missing some spot during my cleaning, but no matter how many times I scrubbed, it kept coming back. And every time, it seemed more aggressive, like it was fighting back. I wasn't worried at first. It was just fungi, right? Old pipes, old building, this sort of thing happened all the time. But then the smell started. It was faint at first, something sour and rank, but within a few days it had become this deep, rotting odor, like something was slowly decaying in the walls. The sound came next. I remember the first time I heard it. It was late, past midnight. The city was still buzzing outside, but the apartment was quiet. Too quiet. And then, from the bathroom I heard something. A faint tapping, like someone was lightly knocking on the porcelain. At first, I thought it was just the pipes. Those old things have been known to make noise. But it wasn't just the pipes groaning. It was rhythmic, scratching, tiny claws, like something was desperately trying to get out from underneath the sink. I tried to ignore it, but the sound persisted, growing louder, more frantic. It started to make my skin crawl. I wasn't sure what to think. I mean, it was probably just the building settling, right? But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The smell, the noise, and now that growing patch of fungi. It wasn't just a stain anymore. It was alive. The next morning, I stood in front of the sink, staring at the black and green tendrils crawling up the faucet. I reached out cautiously to touch it. It felt cold. Unnaturally cold. I recoiled, not sure what I was expecting, but then I noticed something. The fungi. No, it wasn't just fungi anymore. It moved. The tendrils twitched as if reacting to my touch, like they were alive, like they were waiting for something. I stepped back, my heart pounding. I grabbed a sponge and tried to scrub it away again, but as soon as I touched it, I felt a sharp, almost electric sensation run through my fingers. It was subtle, like static, but there. I froze. My mind raced with possibilities. Was I imagining things, or was something seriously wrong? I couldn't get rid of it. No matter how much I scrubbed, it kept coming back, bigger, thicker, and more aggressive. The smell grew stronger, almost unbearable, and the scratching sound from the sink became louder, more insistent. I had to do something. I couldn't let this thing take over my bathroom, my life. I tried calling the landlord, but he never answered. I knew better than to trust a building maintenance crew with something like this anyway. This wasn't just a leaky faucet. I needed someone who knew what they were doing, someone who could deal with, well, whatever the hell this thing was. So I called Rick, my personal plumber from other shitholes I've lived in, kept his number on my fridge at all times. Rick had been in the plumbing business long enough to have seen some pretty weird things. Over the years, he dealt with everything from clogged pipes filled with random objects to water damage so bad that the entire floors of apartments had to be ripped out. But nothing had prepared him for the thing growing in my sink. When I called him, I tried to explain what was happening, how the fungi kept coming back no matter how much I cleaned, how it seemed to move when I touched it, and how the scratching noise had started. I'd left out the part about it looking like something from a horror film, but Rick had been around long enough to know that plumbing often involved more than just fixing leaks. So when Rick arrived, I half expected him to dismiss it as just mold or just a bad pipe problem. But that wasn't Rick's style. He was a no-nonsense kind of guy, and when he saw the fungi, his face immediately changed. He crouched down beside the sink, his eyes narrowing as he took in the growth. It wasn't just any fungi. He'd seen a lot of things growing in old pipes, mold, mildew, even algae. But this was different. This looked too deliberate, too organized, like it had purpose. He leaned in closer, poking at the tendrils with a tool from his belt. He didn't touch it directly, but the way he was studying it, I could tell he recognized it. Zombie ant fungus, he said. his voice steady but with a hint of surprise. I stared at him, not sure if I'd heard him correctly. What? What the hell is that? Rick wiped his brow with the back of his hand, looking a little more serious than usual. Zombie ant fungus. It's a parasitic fungi called Apiocordyceps. It doesn't just grow in places like this, but I've seen it before, in places with bad plumbing. You know, older buildings with leaky pipes where moisture builds up. But I've never seen it in a sink before, especially not this bad. I looked at the sink, still trying to process what he'd just said. Okay, but how do you know it's this specific fungus? Rick took a step back, clearly thinking through his answer. You see, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've dealt with a lot of old buildings. Lots of weird stuff grows in the pipes and walls, but this type of fungus, it's pretty distinctive. It doesn't just grow like regular mold, it spreads out in these tendrils like it's reaching for something, and if you touch it, it reacts, almost like it's alive. That's the giveaway. More than that, I've seen a similar situation in a couple places I've worked. Not too many, but enough to make me remember. There's a reason they call it zombie ant fungus, because it controls ants. Literally takes over their brains, makes them climb up plants and bite onto leaves or twigs, then kills them, and grows out of their heads. This stuff does the same thing in a way. It feeds on whatever organic material it can find, and it spreads quickly. If it gets a hold onto the right environment, it's almost impossible to stop. I just stood there, trying to absorb the absurdity of it all. Wait, I said, swallowing. You're saying this stuff is alive? That's insane. How does it even get in here? I mean, I don't have any ants in my pipes, Rick grunted. I've seen it in other places. It doesn't need ants to grow. It could have been brought in by anything. Maybe something that came through the building's water system, maybe something left behind from a previous tenant, or even a plant you brought in that had spores on it. Hell, it could have been living in the pipes for years and just now found an opening. Doesn't matter. What matters is it's here now, and you need to get rid of it before it takes over. I looked at the tendrils once more, now knowing what I was looking at. I wasn't sure if I felt more relieved or terrified that Rick knew exactly what it was. He immediately got to work, taking out a large bottle of something that looked like industrial cleaner, something stronger than I could have imagined. He said it was a special solution for biological infestations, but the truth was, I didn't care much about the specifics. I just wanted the thing gone. He sprayed it generously, his eyes narrowing as the fungi began to react. I watched, half in awe, half in disgust, as the tendrils shriveled slightly in response. It wasn't gone, not by a long shot, but for the first time since I'd noticed the growth, it seemed to be stopping. Rick stood up and wiped his hands on his pants, eyeing the sink. Alright, this should slow it down a bit. I'll be honest with you, man, you'll need someone who can deal with this more thoroughly. But this'll keep it at bay for now. Give it a couple of days, check on it, see if it starts growing back. If it does, call me and I'll come back. We'll take it from there. I nodded, desperate for something to work. Thanks, Rick. I'll call you if it gets worse. But hey, you're sure it's safe, right? I mean, that stuff you sprayed? Rick didn't look at me, just grabbed his tools. Safe? Well, I wouldn't drink it if I were you, but it'll do the job. Just don't go touching it for a while. Give it a couple of days to settle. With that, he left. And I was left in my apartment with my sink, the memory of the tendrils twitching in my mind, and a sinking feeling in my stomach. For the next couple of days, the noise from the sink stopped. The smell too. The fungi didn't grow. For the first time in a long while, I actually thought I could breathe again. I thought Rick had done it. He'd stopped whatever strange thing had been taking root in my bathroom. But then the dreams started. At first, it was just the unusual scattered nightmares, jumbled images of my life falling apart, me standing at the edge of some great abyss, unable to climb out. But as the days went on, the dreams became clearer, more detailed, more alive. I remember the first one vividly. I was climbing up the side of a building, my hands gripping the stone like they were made for this. My legs burned with the effort, and every time I pushed myself higher, I felt this strange, intoxicating surge of power. The world below me was far, far away, but it didn't matter. I was on top of the world. And then when I reached the top, when I finally crawled over the edge, I stood there, looking out at the city sprawl beneath me, and I felt done, like I had accomplished everything I'd ever set out to do. It was a brief, beautiful moment. But then I woke up, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. The apartment was freezing cold. The usual hum of the city outside was muffled. And for a moment, I thought maybe I hadn't really woken up. I reached for the blanket, my fingers numb, but something was off. Something was wrong. I sat up. The pain was the first thing I noticed, this deep, throbbing ache in my head, almost like I'd been hit with a sledgehammer. And my toes, they felt like they were made of stone. I could feel nothing. I tried to move, but my legs were frozen in place. My body wouldn't move. I stared down at my feet and the cold, unfeeling flesh, and the panic began to rise in me. Was I paralyzed? Had I had a stroke in my sleep? But I could still breathe, still think. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. The pain in my head grew worse, and then the scraping sound started again. But it wasn't coming from the sink anymore. It was in my head.
We must spread.
The whisper wasn't in my ears, it was inside me, like my very thoughts were being hijacked. The voice wasn't mine, it wasn't Rick's, it wasn't anything I knew.
We must spread. We need to spread.
The words were jagged, broken, like they didn't belong in this world. I clenched my fists, but even that felt like too much effort. I was locked in my own body, powerless to stop the whispers. The next night, the same dream, the same building, the same climb. But this time, when I reached the top, I didn't feel accomplished. I felt empty, like I had reached the end of something I didn't even want to start. I woke up again. The pain in my head was unbearable now, and the freezing cold was biting at my skin. But the numbness had spread. My legs, my arms, they were starting to lose feeling. I was losing myself. The whispering grew louder.
We must spread.
The next few days felt like they were slipping through my fingers. The dreams didn't stop. Every night I would climb higher, only to feel more and more empty when I reached the top. The air, once exhilarating, turned suffocating, and the moment I woke up, I found myself colder, deeper into whatever was happening to me. By the fourth day, I couldn't feel my arms anymore. They were just there, useless extensions of my body, and I couldn't move. I couldn't. I was on autopilot, dragging myself through each day like a broken machine. Then came the morning of the job interview, the one I had been clinging to, the one last hope of breaking free from this mess. I woke up early, forcing myself out of bed, but when I tried to move, tried to stand up, I couldn't. My body refused to obey. My arms hung limp, and I could feel the cold creeping up my legs. I tried to scream, but it felt like something was blocking me, holding me down. I was trapped, not just in my apartment, but in my own skin. The whispering returned, louder this time, more insistent.
We must spread.
The words burrowed into my mind like a parasite. I could feel it, feel the thing in me now, the thing that had been growing in the sink, feeding on me, taking over. I tried to fight it. I tried to move, tried to break free, but I was frozen. And then, with a sickening clarity, I realized something horrifying. It wasn't just the fungi spreading. It wasn't just something in my apartment, or my pipes, or even my dreams. I was spreading. My mind raced. I tried to speak, but all I could hear was that whisper.
We must spread. We must spread.
And then, as the last shred of my humanity slipped away, I understood. It wasn't just in my body. It was in my soul, taking it, consuming it. The fungi had spread beyond the pipes. It had spread into me. The last thing I felt was the cold cement of me climbing a building, the Empire State Building to be exact, aligned just like my dreams, only it was my last moment of being human. I am no longer a person. We are a
spore, and we need to spread.